Hello from the Wellstat Conference in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm Julie Parisi, joined now by Barbara Roper. She is from the Consumer Federation of America. Barbara, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about the fiduciary rule. If it dies, what happens?
So in a very real sense, nothing happens. We have life as we know it today. So for a certain community of advisors who take pride in adhering to a higher standard than regulators enforce, they'll go right on practicing in the same way. And unfortunately, for a certain community of so-called advisors who treat their advisory accounts as sales accounts and simply push whatever is most profitable for them, they'll go right on practicing just as usual. And you could argue that under the rule as it currently is proposed by the SEC, the rule that they adopted, it also nothing much changes except that investors will be misled into thinking that they have strong new protections, which they don't.
I think you're already touching on my next question here, which is what kind of behavior needs to change within the industry?
So I think this isn't a problem where advisors are good, brokers are bad. What needs to change across both business models is practice that's driven by the advisor's own financial interests rather than the best interests of the customer. We think the cleanest way to change that is to get rid of some of the compensation practices that encourage and reward advice that's not in investors' best interest. We think it's possible to design a business model both as a broker-dealer and as an advisor that actually aligns the interests of the broker and the customer so that the customer who needs to make every dollar count, as most of us do, actually gets the advice that helps them to achieve that. But the rules right now don't achieve that, and we're a long way off.
Is there any other way to protect investors in this evolving world that we live in?
So what we're looking at in the short term, dealing with the rules that we have on the books, as I said, we recognize that there is a significant portion of the advisory community that takes pride in adhering to a higher standard than the regulators are willing to enforce. The challenge for us is to figure out what are the ways that we can come up with to steer investors toward those investor-friendly business models, investor-friendly advisors. And so that's what, in the wake of the rule adoption, that's what we're kind of thinking through, is how we develop a set of investor education materials that we can use to help steer people toward the advisors who really do embrace an obligation to act in their best interest while we're fighting to get the regulations up, brought up to an appropriate level.
That's very well put, Barbara. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.